Before I get started, I want to set up the scene I'm going to read. It's a bit hard to get in the mindset of, because number one, it takes place in 1997, and number two, it takes place on a very cold day in Ann Arbor, Michigan. So, I guess, in yoga, our right side is our cooling side, and we always sort of think about things that can cool us off. And what I thought I would do is play some music that makes me think of cold weather in Michigan while I get into character. And as I look at my phone, I see there are 2 text messages from Bradford Krieger saying, "Thank me anyway, I couldn't make it." So, I don't know what they said, but I'm going to play this music, and as I play the music, if anyone, without using Shazam, can name this tune later, I have a little bit of a prize for you. And then I'm going to change into the main character of my novel, whose name is Ariel Zinsky, and that's why the book is called Zinsky the Obscure. So let me cue this up, and hopefully it'll sound all right.
So do what you can to anoint my head.
We were silent on the walk to my apartment. It was a full moon night in the upper 20s, the type to which every Michigan undergrad becomes inured. Filthy snow piles surrounded us on the lamppost-lit sidewalks. As soon as we turned onto Washington Street, the wind shifted from our backs to our faces. Sheila's paper rustled in her hands, flapping loudly like a miniature fan. Just in time for the sound effect. In my apartment, I found myself explaining, again, why the living room floor was strewn with football cassettes. Sheila nodded. Everything made sense to her. "You really do have a passion for what you do," she said, removing her boots at the door. She picked up October 12th, 1996, Michigan State 42, Illinois 14. "That was a breakout game for Derek Mason," I said, removing my boots. "Is he one of your favorite players?" she asked, sitting on the beat-up yellow upholstered couch, placing the cassette on her lap. "You could say that," I said. I went into my bedroom to retrieve my Gatsby paper, expecting Sheila would remain on the couch, but she followed me. "Holy shit, you have more tapes in here," she exclaimed. She kneeled to the floor and scooped up 2 of them. Eyeing me coyly, she said, "They're such beautiful cassettes," playfully sliding one along her tanned cheek, still sanguine from the cold. "It makes me sad because I've never seen such beautiful cassettes before. Very funny, I muttered, handing her my paper. She sat at my computer, from which I'd recently sent out my guide newsletter. So this is where it all happens, right? She asked. This is where you write your football books? Yup, I said. Okay, she said, rolling up the sleeves of her pink button-down shirt. Then this is where I want to read. Maybe I can catch some of your passion. She flattened my Gatsby paper on the desk and began reading. Nick Carraway wants to play Matthew to Gatsby's Christ, penning a hagiographic version of another man's life story. But Nick is no ordinary Matthew. He is a Matthew bent on asserting the accuracy of his Gatsby Christ gospel, all the while insulting the accounts of Mark, Luke, and John. Not 5 pages go by, it seems, without Nick introducing documents, train schedules on which he records party guests, Gatsby's boyhood notebooks, Gatsby's medals from the war, to persuade readers that Nick's version of Gatsby's life and death is the only verifiable one. All other accounts, proclaims Nick, were a nightmare, grotesque, circumstantial, eager, and untrue. In short, Nick seems paranoid about alternative versions of a history to which he's hardly an objective observer. He becomes a spin doctor of Gatsby's legacy. Witness his erasure of an obscene word scrawled on the, quote, white steps outside Gatsby's house. Incidentally, Professor Dalrymple, I believe Nick's erasure scene is the literary ancestor of Holden's attempt to erase expletives from the walls of Phoebe's school in Catcher in the Rye. And I must say, the action of erasing an obscenity seems more plausible coming from a wide-eyed youth like Holden than it does from Nick, unless Mr. Carraway is not as world-weary as he'd have us believe he is by the book's end. And Nick wants us to believe he's weary, for he goes out of his way twice in this novel to announce that he's 30 years old, as if desperately trying to impose his numerical maturity on the reader. As Sheila read, I stared shamelessly at her, catching the profile of her breasts as she inked remarks in my margins. Soon, she caught me peeking. Are you reading my paper? She smiled, before turning back to my essay. I retreated into the world of Sheila's paper, with its page numbers on the lower left and its solemn Palatino font. She compared the language and imagery of a Warrensburg, Ohio story called Hands to that of Gertrude Stein's 3 Lives. I was about halfway done reading when she said, "Okay, are we ready to talk about these?" I never would have thought to connect Hands and 3 Lives, I said. You're too kind, she said. I searched for a connection because we had to write a paper. But your essay seems totally unforced. It's amazing. It's better than Dalrymple's lecture. I feel like my essay scooped the ocean floor and found a few flounders, whereas yours is about the wetness of the ocean. Does that make sense? Don't give me too much credit, I said. My mom's an English teacher. I've read Gatsby a dozen times. I do a lot to have your brains. I do a lot if you wanted the rest of me, I said. Silence. Where's your bathroom? She asked. She left. I rolled onto my back and drifted into a fantasy of Sheila returning naked and joining me on the bed. I fancied what life must have been like for her ex. I wondered how any man could dump her. "What are you thinking about?" said Sheila. She sat Indian style on the bed beside me, her odorless, thick black socks inches from my nose. Then she lay on her side so that she faced me, our heads on the same plane. "Tell me what you're thinking," she whispered. Her cola-colored eyes floated within their whites like brown buoys on a milky surface. I stroked her light brown hair with my trembling fingertips. "Can I tell you something?" she whispered. "I don't want to go back to my room tonight," she said. I leaned closer to her. Her mouth greeted mine with closed lips. I sensed her hesitation, and though it hurt me, I was too elated about kissing her again to mourn the relative dispassion of the clench. This was the second kiss of my life, and for all its shortcomings, it still felt like the pleasurable culmination of 1,000 once-buried wishes. My right hand moved from her hair to her shoulder. Sheila grabbed it there. "Would it be all right," she whispered, "if we just shut the lights and talked?" I nodded. She found the light switch and returned to my bed. Mellow rays of lamppost light shone through my blindless window. We kissed again, or I should say, she let me kiss her. My tongue treaded within her inert mouth. Her tongue did not move in sync with mine so much as it met and supported, provided assurance through mere presence. Her hands were on my back now, over my sweater. We continued to kiss. She half-heartedly, I with about 6 hearts. To this day, I don't know why what happened next. It was as if someone, not me, flipped an off-on switch inside Sheila. In 2 deft motions, she unzipped my jeans and shoved down my boxers. Her robotic alacrity shocked me. Not so much her possession of quick moves, but her rapid decision to abandon her resistance. In turn, I reached for her sweats, hoping to seem smooth and certain. In hooking her waistband, I inadvertently snared her panties, but she didn't stop me. Next, we removed each other's tops, and she was on me, and I was in her, without a word about contraception. With intense forearm pressure, she squeezed my head against her collarbone. I sought kissing her, but she wouldn't lower her mouth. I sought sucking her nipples, but she held me firm to her neckline. Of course, it wasn't difficult subordinating these niggling concerns to everything else racing through my mind. How the inside of her felt like a warm bath within an endless glove. How her ass cheeks were almost too muscular to grip. How I was having sex. A hallowed act of matchless significance according to everyone and everything. Yet, my mind and body, for all they did feel, had yet to feel wholly new or transformed. And how I was, in point of fact, fucking, though my mind was too preoccupied processing the moment to surrender to libidinal pleasure. Throughout, for all 30 or so seconds, I was unable to lose myself in ecstasy for fear Sheila would reverse her off-on switch and dismount. I felt like I might get caught trespassing. All this while I was cozy and erect inside her. I gasped, giving vent to primal spasms, the unexpected pleasure of bursting into a warm body rather than my hand. It surpassed the agonizing release of standing ejaculation. For here was flesh to clasp during those long, wrenching shrieks. a heated vessel absorbing my groans and shocks. I loved Sheila more than anything at that moment. She was there for me as my body erupted and emptied and fell weak with joy and relief, surrender and gratitude. And then it was over. I had slept with someone, and I could not believe I had slept with anyone, let alone Sheila. And all because of my note, my essay. Whatever had flipped her off on switch, I had no idea. I was flabbergasted and confused. So women could fuck without kissing? What did that mean for my father's pronouncement about sex as a sacred female act? In the aftermath, Sheila seemed disturbed. I tried kissing her and she kept her lips closed, and I felt no spark from her lips. It seemed as if she'd gone from half-hearted to vacant. I grabbed her hand and kissed it several times. I guided her palm to my muscleless chest, her fingertips pulsing life through my nipples. I pressed her hand against my sternum, hoping to squeeze the neutrality from her clinical fingers, because her indifferent hand was better than no hand at all, and because I wasn't certain when or whether she or another woman would touch my chest again. She said, "Ari, I'll keep my hand there, but I don't want you to get the wrong idea about my ability to commit. And I don't want you to wind up hating me if I don't stop to talk to you in class, or I can't be with you again. Just please keep your hand there and don't worry about the rest," I whispered. Ha. "I think you're getting attached," she said. "I'm not. And if I am, it's my problem. You've given me the disclaimers." "Fine," she said. She curled onto her side and pressed her head into the crook of my left arm. We lay naked and silent for several minutes. Finally, I spoke up. "What are you thinking about?" I asked. "I'm thinking, where's your blanket?" she said. A thin beam of lamppost light cut through the celery green of her lower back's tattoo. My blanket was wedged between me and the wall. With a series of graceless kicks and shakes, I spread it over both of us. "How many women have you slept with?" she asked. "None," I admitted. Honesty had gotten me this far, and I was still too stunned about what had taken place to dissemble. "But I can tell you've been hurt," she said. "How can you tell?" "You have some of my symptoms. I've never seen a guy who does what you do." "What do you mean?" "You bury yourself in activity, and you don't even realize it. Your whole lifestyle is a display of self-medication." "Do other guys hold your hand to their chest?" "That's unusual too, but I don't know actually. You seem to think I'm so experienced. Nick, that's my ex, is the only person I've slept with." "Wow," I said. "Tell me what you're thinking," she asked. I considered saying the following. "I'm thinking about whether you'll ever kiss me again," or "I'm thinking I wish you were here every night." Instead of saying those things, I said, "I'm wondering if, as my life goes on, I'll just look at each sexual chance like a poor family treats a meal at a restaurant. You know, that it's special just because you're not cooking it yourself. And you don't know when it might happen again." "I don't know, Ari. I think if you spent less time on football and more time talking to freshman women, you'd do pretty well." I wanted to debate that point, but opted for silence, rather than risk saying something that might make her remove her hand from my chest. When I woke the next morning, she was gone, and so was my virginity. Thanks, everybody. They've asked what my mother thinks of the book. Thanks, Nathan. And let me see how we're doing on time, because I have like a 5-minute story that provides a good answer, but I don't want to like crush the time. Okay, so when I was really little, I shared a bedroom with my younger brother, and you know, we had a lot of stuffed animals, and we'd always create these stuffed animal conversations. And many years later, when my brother was finally in college and I had just moved to Boston, my mother, you know, went on some like, you know, menopausal cleaning binge and just you know, threw out every stuffed animal except for like the 3 that were in mint condition. So my brother and I promptly deemed this the stuffed animal holocaust. And then my mom said, well, I saved these 3. My brother's like, oh, you're a regular Schindler. Thanks a lot. So I wrote a short story based on that called A Loss to the Stuffed Animal Kingdom, which came out in 2008. And the mother in that story is, you know, a kind of is not the most balanced character I've ever created. And my mother read that, and I think that kind of like, you know, I think she was very hesitant to read other things that came out. But she did read Zinsky the Obscure, and I'll tell you exactly what her reaction was. And you know, the best thing about my mom is she's, you know, if she, you know, I get this from her. Like if she didn't like it, she'd tell me. She told me she didn't like A Lost to the Stuffed Animal Kingdom. She's like, I think that story's terrible. So, yeah, you know, so I'm like, yeah, what mother would do that? But so she said to me, and you know, I think those of you who've started the book probably have a similar reaction. She had some tough times getting through the early parts of the book, some of which are autobiographical and based on some tough times that we had as a family when I was very young. So I think some of it took her back there, but she said, but as she got further and further into the book, it became more of just a regular book to her. And I think that's the experience a lot of people have with it anyway, even if they're not the mother of the author. So what's great is, you know, to market a book, you really have to reach people in my mom's demographic. They're part of the big, you know, fiction buying set. And I've wanted to reach book clubs for a while, but I felt maybe I have to disclaim some of the racier material in it. But, you know, my mom has begun recommending it to all of her friends, and they're weighing in and liking it. So I was thrilled that she ended up liking it, and not just because she's my mom and I want to please her, but because she's a tough critic. So, the question was, any thoughts of turning it into a film? And then Carla chimed in to say who would play Zinsky, and I mean, it's not. I mean, my only hope is I can give the book enough publicity that it gets into the hands of someone who actually makes these sorts of decisions. I would love for it to be a movie. I think any author wants their book to become a movie, because then more people read the book. You know, even if the movie version stinks, then more people read the book. And I don't think, it's funny, Tony McMillan asked me this question too, and I don't think there's an actor out there who played Zinsky. In some ways, I created him to be sort of against the type of a typical male hero. He doesn't look like a leading man. He's, you know, he loses all his hair when he's 16. That's not evident from the passage I read. And he's, you know, gangly and 6'8". Early in the book, I describe him as being built like a halogen lamp. So, you know, I think he's decidedly not leading man type. And I have, you know, if I'm ever lucky enough for there to be a movie based on it, I just don't think that I think Hollywood would probably do what the HBO people did to Tyrion Lannister in Game of Thrones, and they would give him, you know, they'd make him short, but they'd give him this really photogenic face. And they would probably do something like that, which I guess, you know, comes with acting. The question was, it began with a statement. So Zinsky, he's pretty much a schlemiel, a nebbish. Am I reading something into it that's not there? And the answer is no, you're not. You know, I basically, in the 4 years that I was, you know, at first searching for an agent and then a publisher, I kind of made it an annual ritual where there'd be a 3-month period where I would just reread the entire novel and do another draft. And in the intervening year, almost everything I I read or took in another genre played something of an influence. And I think that even just continuing to read more and just becoming just someone who's read more books and lived more life, I kept making changes. I don't know if it had to do with things I experienced, or if it was just another year goes by and you get a little harder and less sensitive to cutting something that was there before. But definitely I kept finding new changes every year. And in the last year before it got published, I probably made the severest cuts of them all. And I think that had a good deal to do with why it eventually got accepted. What's the favorite thing that someone has said about the book? One reason I thanked Tony McMillan at the start of the night was because he said it, and he just compared Zinsky to other famous Nebushes and Schlemiels in literary history, Don Quixote and Kilgore Trout and Ignatius Riley, and even to some extent T.S. Garp. So that's been my favorite, absolutely. Thanks everybody.